Here we go again. Hi guys, I'm sorry I was away for so long. I was studying and having a life outside of YouTube and blah blah. Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna be trying to answer a question that many of us kind of ask ourselves. I'm so sorry. Is radical activism actually effective? That's it. With the increased media attention on activism action, especially for climate change and the animal rights movement, and to the public perception of how extreme these actions are becoming, does it actually shift the public opinion on these topics, or are we actually seeing the opposite effect? And on that note, let's find out. So let's start by defining what is activism. According to a study written by Jordan from 2002, activism is defined as the practice of a group of individuals to bring about social, political, economic, or other changes to the status quo. According to the studies that we looked into, activism can be put into one or more of the four categories: normative, non-normative, violent, and non-violent. Activism can take many shapes and forms, as we can see now on the screen. So there are several ways of bringing about the message in regards to a certain social cause. But what makes activism effective? When it came to the research of this topic, it was quite complicated to find any source, because given that this is the public perception on the activists' actions, it is quite tricky to find randomized controlled trials on this. So most of the studies base themselves on surveys. And all the news articles that we found on this topic all quote this one specific paper called "Radical Flanks of Social Movements Can Increase Support for Moderate Factions." This study is actually encompassing of the animal rights movement and also the climate movement. A journal article. So this journal article aimed to answer three main questions: whether the presence of a radical flank can lead to more or less public support for the moderate factions, why such radical flank effects occur, and whether these effects primarily occur when a radical flank have a radical agenda, employ radical tactics, or both. So the empirical strategy of the study was based on two web-based surveys, where our first experiment investigated the radical flank effects in the context of the animal rights movement, and the second in the context of the climate movement. So it seems that they evaluated around 2,000 people. I wrote this in my notes, but now I'm rereading the article and I can't find this information. So I'm sorry if this is wrong. Found it. For the first experiment, we have around 1,100 participants, and for the second, 1,600 participants. Even though there's two experiments involved in this study, we will focus on the one about the animal rights movement. So what they did with the participants is that divide them into groups. To one of them, they showed a moderate animal rights group called American Against Animal Cruelty, which they were told, the participants, seeks to improve the conditions in factory farming, while also encouraging Americans to reduce their meat consumption. While the other half of the participants read about another group considered radical called No Animals for Food, which is described as seeking to completely end human consumption of animals and the consumption or use of all animal byproducts. After this, they were required to answer a survey about both of the groups, and then all participants read a description of the focal faction, which was identical across conditions. The focal faction was called People Against Cruelty to Animals, which aimed to raise public awareness of inhumane treatment of animals in factory farms. So the whole point of the study was seeing how, by having a different standard in the beginning, that would change the perception of the second group. So even though we were focused more on the animal rights part, this is also true for the climate experiment that they conducted. The findings from both of these experiments suggest that there is causal evidence for the positive radical flank hypothesis, demonstrating that the presence of a radical flank can increase identification with and support for a moderate faction in the same social movement. So what this means is that the fact that there is a radical activist group or that employs radical tactics can influence the public perspective on the moderate activism group and see them as more sensible and less radical even though the agendas of both groups might actually be the same and just the employed strategies be different. So on the topic of violence, there's actually a book called Why Civil Resistance Works, written by 2 authors, and what they did was analyze all mass actions from 1900 until 2006, and by accounting for 160 different variables related to success criteria, participant categories, and blah, 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 they concluded that nonviolent civil resistance was far more effective in producing change. If you're interested in that topic, we can not do that in this video, but maybe in the future if you want to learn about it. But we're more focused in non-violent types of protesting because there seems to already been a massive amount of literature that proves that violence in any shape or form is not the best way to dissuade or convince anyone of any moral argument. This video is not funny! So serious, this video. I'm so sorry. This is what happens when I try to learn shit. My personal opinion is that I do believe moderate activism for the majority of people is what ends up convincing them. But radical activism is what brings the topic to the table and makes it relevant. So I do believe there is a symbiosis relationship between both factions of the movement, and now I'm specifically talking about the animal rights movement, that makes them so complementary. This is redundant because symbiosis is complementary. I'm very good with words, people, here. So it's symbiotic, and we have to accept that both of these exist. And even if there are radical activists or moderate activists that you personally don't agree with, or I personally don't agree with, we have to see that in the broader picture of things, it does have an impact and they do help each other, and we are helping each other. Not me, because I'm not an activist, but let's just accept that I am for now, okay? Activist here. And yeah, I think that's it. This was very interesting. It changed my mind on this topic as well. Like, it was something I didn't really know that much about, and I got to know more. So that's always good, I guess. But I hope you learned something from this video, and that next time you see an activist performing an action that you might not agree with, that at least this is bringing attention to the topic they're fighting for. So what do you think? Do you think radical activism is effective, or do you think it actually distracts from the main message? Let me know in the comments what your opinion is, and what did you think about this video. And on that note, bye!